In a previous video, I talked about how it's worthwhile to study Christmas carols. They may have fond memories from when you were young and simple and naive, but in point of fact, not only can you kind of, recover some of that childlike excitement you had, you also appreciate those carols a lot more. Well, now I want to suggest that you should actually visit a Christmas carol again for the holiday season. First of all, because what better to get you in the mood? I mean, how many various adaptations of the Christmas Carol story by Dickens have you seen in your life, around Christmas time? I mean, probably at least as many, or at least almost as many as you've seen nativity scenes. So that's exactly what I've done. I dug up this. This is a really nice book. When I was very young, digging it up, looking at it again. And I would recommend that, presuming that you can find any copies, that they're not already snatched up, that you revisit the Alastair Sim. I haven't looked to see if it's online. If it is, watch it there. Though shame on you for doing it, but but the Alastair Sim 1951, I believe, version of A Christmas Carol remains the best. I say that with all due respect to the Muppet Christmas Carol, which is awesome as well, and to Michael Caine and to Jim Carrey and all the rest, and to Patrick Stewart. It's a pretty impressive list, but I'm sorry, Alastair Sim is the king. He nails Scrooge so well. And the scene where when he wakes up near the end, realizing he's not dead and he can still atone his ways it's just the most delightful acting. You need to check it out. But watching it now and reading the story again now, you detect a lot of themes you may have missed when you were a kid. And in point of fact, will make you appreciate maybe the latent influences it planted in you when you were a kid, when you read the book or saw any of the productions of it. Dickens, of course, was, not overly religious as far as I know, but he did, I have a book of journalism somewhere, like the best journalistic reports of the last, whatever, since the printing press. And there was a story in there about Dickens that he wrote when he went to Rome to witness an execution. A dude had been beheaded because he killed a pilgrim during Lent. And he definitely, as a good journalist, was up on this stuff to some extent. But he reminds me a little bit in this respect of Bram Stoker, who was a Protestant, but if you read Dracula, he doesn't understand Catholicism insofar as he doesn't really know theology of it that well, but he has an intuitive grasp. There's something about it that's attractive, and his Protestant characters are uncomfortable with using rosaries and whatever, but it's the crucifix that drives. And he calls them crucifixes, right? But it's them that drive the vampire away. It's the Eucharist that has power over Dracula. So, and he gets so much stuff wrong, just in the names and the terminology. But there is something that I think his artistic mind detected about Catholicism that had some power. And I think the same is the case with Charles Dickens, who also gets stuff wrong. Like he calls the hymn "God rest you, merry gentlemen," "God bless you, merry gentlemen," for example. But I think there was something about him that intuitively, and of course he wrote the book by his own admission as a potboiler, but I think he hit on something about Christmas and about its significance that is really why he is so enamored with it, and why that story has enamored people every Christmas since it was published. Scrooge, of course, is a Puritan, if you're looking carefully enough. The name Ebenezer is a very Puritan name. It's biblical. It's the name of it's a rock. It's erected in 1 Samuel chapter 7. That's like the Protestant Bible, of course. But and the hymn "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing" has that line, "Here I raise my Ebenezer." It means it's a monument to something that God has done for His people. Apparently Dickens just saw the name Ebenezer Scrooge or something like that on a tombstone. I just thought it was like a good name. And also it said meal man, but he misread that as mean man. So that's where the name Ebenezer Scrooge comes from. But I think there must have been something about the name that he liked, especially since Scrooge, I understand, meant to squeeze. And it just sounds good too, Ebenezer Scrooge. But it's a very Puritan name. And especially if you watch the movie, the Sim film, and probably some others. I mean, I didn't, go through all of the movie adaptations, but it's obvious that him and Bob Marley are money changers. They're usurers, basically. They're capitalists who make their money and are gouging the people by charging interest on them, exorbitant rates of interest. Which, of course, was read your Max Weber. I mean, that's what the Protestants were doing and the Catholics were condemning it. From Aquinas on down, at least, because of his Aristotelian influences. So, and in the movie, this isn't in the book, but in the movie it's interesting because, the book talks about Fozziwig and how Scrooge started off working for him. In the movie, another business owner or broker or whatever comes and offers Scrooge. Well, he talks to Fozziwig and says that machines are the way of the future, like counting machines, and you need to kind of update and merge with me and all this. And Fozziwig says, well, that may be the case, but I should have written it down. I had to return it to the library, but he says something like, and it's cliche. I mean, I'm not citing this as great dog, but something like, they may be the way of the future, and I may soon be kind of dated and archaic, but I have lots of men here, and I don't want to lose them, and there's something about the human touch. I mean, I built this to be for people, and it's going to stay for people, kind of a thing. So the dude sort of waves him up and says, all right, whatever you say. And he goes over to Scrooge and says, you seem like a bright young guy. Why don't you come work for me? And at first Scrooge says, well, no, I mean, I want to be loyal to Fozziwig. And he says, well, if you change your mind, give me a call. And sure enough, Scrooge goes over to that guy's side where he meets Bob Marley, played by a young Patrick Macnee, who you will remember if you're cool from the Avengers. And then eventually this guy who's running this firm or whatever gets convicted of embezzlement, and Scrooge and Marley take the opportunity. They say that they'll pay for all this guy's what he's accrued, like his debt or whatever, as long as they can take over and make it into Scrooge and Marley. Then there's the scene where Marley dies, which is interesting because Scrooge goes in to see if he's dead yet, and he asks the undertaker or whatever, whoever's, I think it's a nurse or something. He says, "Have you given them the last rites and all that?" And they say yes, So he goes in and leans over and puts his ear to Marley's mouth, and he whispers like, "Save yourself," and kind of croaks that out before he croaks. So there's a lot there that's, I think, implicit. I think Dickens would have kind of approved of all that. That's the spirit that he's getting at. But you can see a lot there. I mean, Protestant, industrialized, progressive, mid to late 19th century English culture is all being critiqued here. That's sort of the target in Dickens and in this movie, which I think got what Dickens was getting at. And the remedy for all of that Protestantism, for all that Puritanism, is Christmas. He's converted to the spirit of Christmas, which I would submit, if you look at the history of Christmas, is Catholicism. Now, of course, Dickens doesn't say that, and I've never seen it, and I'm not even suggesting that he implied that Scrooge becomes a Catholic. But I think if you really understand what it means to fall in love with Christmas as Scrooge does. And even though he describes Scrooge by the time he's converted, and it is a conversion, really, he's basically described the way that one would describe a saint. And in fact, the entire book could be seen as a kind of deathbed conversion that he happens to be saved from, which has never really been, it's more of a Baptist thing than a Puritan thing. It kind of had that, Salvation Army type revival. Like the revivalists would do that, right? But it wasn't really a Puritan thing. It was more of like a charismatic thing. It was more of an enthusiast thing than it was a Puritan thing. To have like a deathbed conversion or a dramatic conversion at the tent meeting. Although, as Chesterton points out, normally at those meetings a person was converted from the punch bowl, whereas Scrooge is converted to the punch bowl. But it does have that same kind of dramatic quality to it. And it does mention in the book that he went to church that the morning of Christmas. And in the Patrick Stewart version, he tries to sing the words to God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, but doesn't know them, so he has to share a hymnal with somebody, which I think might have been a sly dig at Dickens, not knowing the words to his own song that he mentioned in the book. But even the spirits themselves. Well, first of all, it's possible to see in what Marley does, especially knowing that he had the last rites administered to him, something kind of purgatorial. He's interceding on Scrooge's behalf in the afterlife. You know, he's kind of, I mean, it doesn't say that, but he's still, in this vision that Dickens presents, people in the afterlife are still concerned with what's going on Earth. I can apparently intervene in it to some extent. And what's interesting, again, when Marley appears to Scrooge, Scrooge starts rationalizing him away. You know, says, "There's more of gravy than grave in you," which is kind of the opposite if you look like Hamlet or something, who says, there's more things in heaven and earth that are dreamt of in your philosophy, Ebenezer. And when you see, I mean, in this vision of the world, it's heavily spiritual. It's heavily, I don't want to, but beneath the veneer of bare materiality there's ghosts everywhere, wandering around who are cursed and this kind of thing. And actually, I don't, it's somewhere in here. Let me just see if I can find it really quick. Because now I have 15-minute long videos and you can waste time like this. So I'm gonna look. Oh, right, yeah. There's something that he says, that Marley says to Scrooge. Scrooge says, "You are fettered." Trembling, he says so. "Tell me why." "I wear the chain I forged in life," replied the ghost. I should say even here, I mean, he's wearing, like, the tools that he used to oppress people, like, money boxes and things like this. It's almost Dante-esque in a way, where, like, your punishment in the afterlife is what you were doing on Earth, only more so, kind of. "I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is its pattern strange to you?" And then he says, "Well, you've got an even longer one." But there's that, I made this chain. First of all, there's this, and throughout the whole book, there's this real virtue ethics that would be very unpalatable to the ears of the Puritans, or to Calvin, or to Luther. You, by your own free will, forge your own punishment. You choose, to be a sinner. And Scrooge's repentance constitutes restitution. It's a change in life, the change of, his manner, and he starts doing good works, basically. That's very, very, a Puritan could not have written this, really. And he says something else in here as well that I thought was sort of interesting. Everything he kind of says to Scrooge, I find kind of fascinating. There's a lot of commentary in the book about, the world hereafter. He calls Scrooge, when Scrooge refuses to believe in him, "Oh, man of worldly mind." There's a ton of stuff you could really say about this. But he says something about how in the world to come, you know what, I'm not even going to bother talking about it, because it's probably not as interesting as I think it is. Then, of course, the ghosts show up, the ghost of Christmas, and it's been, I think, rightly commented. The ghost of Christmas present is obviously Father Christmas. He's St. Nicholas, who I've talked about in other videos. Ghost of Christmas yet to come, Ghost of Christmas future is Saint Death. He is the Grim Reaper, obviously. Who, of course, has been kind of informally canonized in some full Catholic circles. He's the angel of death, obviously, and Catholicism, of course, has always been very much about the preparation for death. I think that the entire book is just kind of shot through and through with these kind of themes. And the other thing, too, is that, I should just say this before I close the video, the future's open, to some extent, because Scrooge asks the Ghost of Christmas yet to come, can these be changed? Again, this is not compatible with Calvinism. And certainly, if this future can be changed, it can't be changed by you. There's no cooperation between divine grace and yourself. So I think it could be fairly said that this book is, in a subtle way, about a rejection of Puritanism, and by extension secularism in all its more modern forms, in favor of a more traditional, distributist, Catholic vision of both the world to come and the present. That's all I'm going to say for now. Have a Merry Christmas, and read good literature. You will be edified for it.